two comments by the same person. First one says, the fact that so many cases just get rubber stamped at appeals council, yet federal finds all of these errors, very telling. From my own experience, there is intentional misconduct and mishandling of people's cases. And then they also commented on, I think, a different post. Well, I'll give a little bit of context. We were talking about trust the process. I think we did an episode that's just called Trust the Process.
Right.
And they commented and they said, unfortunately, I don't think some people can just trust the process if they want to survive to see their case approved. So there's two things I want to address in this episode. The first comment is about the federal cases. So I want to address what that even means, like hearing to appeals council to federal. And then what she's getting at is how is it that the appeals council denies almost every case, and then the federal will approve so many? Doesn't that just mean that the appeals council is not doing their job? Which is pretty much true, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the whole trust the process bit, I want to break down what we don't mean when we say trust the process, because we don't mean you get a denial and then you just,
oh, well, they told me.
I'm not denied then. Yeah. That's not what we mean. Yeah. We just mean, and again, I'll let you talk more about this, but when I think of trust the process, I think of when they send you a form, you fill it out. When you get denied, you file the appeal. And then when you're in the hearing, you don't argue with the judge about, Donald Trump during the hearing or something like that. That's trust the process, like go through the whole process. And you can think that it's ridiculous, but don't try to make up your own rules for while you're in the middle of the process. So we'll get into the whole trust the process bit, but real quick, just kind of recap. A client is denied a couple times. They make it to the hearing level, hearing in front of a judge. They get denied again, and then they go to the appeals council. Just pick it up from there, and then...
Okay.
Yep.
So I've said this before, and it's, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings at the appeals council, but if I were commissioner for a day, I would abolish the appeals council. So
yeah.
If I hurt your feelings because you work at the appeals council, I do apologize to you. It's not anything personal. It's just statistically you are irrelevant. 14% of the cases, this stat's pretty much stayed the same also. 14% of the cases that are appealed to the appeals council are remanded. So the appeals council says, essentially, 85% of the decisions we say, we agree with the judge. The judge was right. They'll try to kind of spin that to where, well, the judge might not have done everything right, but overall, the errors that he made were called harmless errors, and that's a legal term that you never, ever want to encounter. It's not harmless error, or it is harmless error. And the appeals council will always say that, yeah, they made an error, but it's harmless error. So they still would have denied him, but so the error that they made is harmless. When it gets to the judge's decision, we go over it with a fine-tooth comb. I want to make sure that the judge did everything that they needed to do. And there's 5, I think, issues that you can bring up to the appeals council as the basis for an appeal. The judge was wrong because of the 2 that they actually look at is that there was an error of law, that they actually didn't follow their own rules, or that substantial evidence doesn't support their decision. Okay, well, they found this, but the bulk of the evidence says that it should be that. Those are the 2 reasons that we representatives get the most traction with. So, the process is we'll get a judge's decision, we'll look through it. Usually, my decision or my appeals are going to be on those 2 issues. There's an error of law, or the substantial evidence does not support the decision. I will say this, in the circuit that I'm in, that I live in, actually, we handle cases all over the country, but there are particular judges in the circuit that, in the state which in the area that I live in, that actually say something that is so telling, and I've seen it over and over and over again, that they will send the case back. These are federal magistrates, and I'm going to talk to you about federal court in a minute, but these are federal magistrates who have gotten a referral or a case from us through our attorney partners that we have file federal court cases, and we'll get the remand from federal court, and there will be comments in there like, once again, Social Security has failed to follow their own rules. And you see these kinds of incendiary comments like that, and as a representative, you're like, yeah, go get them. Wait a minute, I'm the one who's going to go get them. And but it happens over and over again, especially, like I said, in the circuit that I'm in. There are some judges in that circuit that just obviously they see a lot of the same mistakes made over and over, and they'll write something. Once again, Social Security won't follow their own rules. That's an error of law, and so that's one of the reasons that we send cases to them. But the mechanics of it, what it looks like is we have a hearing, and we make our case to the judge. The judge issues a decision. I disagree with that decision. My client disagrees with the decision. And I say, do you want me to appeal that to the appeals council? Because that's the next level, level 4. Going to the appeals council, and it's a brief. You don't get to testify again. You don't get to show your face to the appeals council. They're so insulated that for us to even talk to a decision maker in the appeals council is some kind of blasphemy. It's like heresy. Don't you contact the appeals council. You just send them their brief. You sit on your hands and you wait for their decision, and it's going to come. 85% of the time, they're going to basically say, yeah, the judge was right. So that's what happens. So we do a brief, and we send it to the appeals council. And this person who wrote that must have some personal experience, because the term that I use 85% of the time is the appeals council rubber stamp the judge's decision. They don't address any of my appeal issues in their rubber stamp denial. And they basically say, this is the final decision of the Social Security Administration. If you don't like it, you can file in federal court. And we do. We have attorneys that we work with all over the country. There's several of them that we use. And we will basically say, hey, this is the case. This is why we believe the judge was wrong. This is why we definitely believe the appeals council should have remanded it or reversed it. Do you want to take the case? The vast majority of the cases we send them, they take. And they file in federal court, and you are exactly right, and this person is exactly right. The vast majority of those cases come back on remand. And why did I start this whole diatribe out by saying if I was commissioner for a day, I would abolish the appeals council? Because she's right. The vast majority of federal cases come back on remand. Keep in mind that when they come back, the path that they took to get to federal court, they got to come back the same path. So you have an administrative law judge who denies, the appeals council who upholds the denial. Federal court says, nope, that Social Security was wrong. We're not going to reverse, because they might not be disabled, but Social Security, missed the boat on this. We're sending it back. Does it go back to the judge? No, not yet. It goes back to the appeals council. It has to travel the same route that it went. So think about that. You at the appeals council have rubber stamped the judge's decision. And a few months later, you get a decision from federal court that says, there's no way you should have rubber stamped this judge's decision. This was an error. Some firms are running 70 to 80%.
Remand rate from federal?
70 to 80%.
Yep.
If it was 50%, by the way, we do, with our attorney partners, we do about 70. But if it was as low as 50, if half the cases that we send up there were remanded, that basically, federal court says, no, Social Security was wrong. Think about that. 85% of the appeals council cases, rubber stamped. And then it comes back a few months later from federal court. And you would think after this happens for years and years and decades that the appeals council would that they wouldn't be rubber stamping 85% of cases that they get, that they'd actually be, okay, well, we got to tighten this up. You would think that would happen eventually. Let me tell you that in my business, if my employees were wrong 85% of the time, or if they were issuing a decision 85% of the time, and then some higher authority said, you guys are wrong 50% of the time. Okay, you guys need to tighten it up. Obviously, you're doing something wrong. And if they didn't tighten it up, I would fire them. That's why if I was commissioner for a day, I would abolish the appeals council, because they've had decades upon decades upon decades of these federal court cases coming back at them and saying things like Social Security won't follow their own rules. And it's still 85%. We're still going to rubber stamp them. And it just, I've obviously you can tell because my face is probably beet red right now, that it really bothers me. I have a case right now that, I'm going to win it. I know I'm going to win it. I'm probably going to have to win it with federal court just reversing it. And that happens too. Federal court's like, there's no reason to remand this. The decision was so unsupported, was so obviously wrong, that we're not going to put the client through another year or year and a half. Because when they remand it, guess what? It takes a long time to back trace through that path that it took to get to federal court. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to make this disabled person wait another 12, 18 months to get a hearing with the same judge who has already missed the boat. And so they'll reverse it. But why? Why should we have to jump through those kinds of hoops? What's going on? And then addressing what this person says with, I believe that they're intentionally doing this kind of thing. Well, I've said this, and I'll stand by it. I believe that the Social Security Administration, the brass in Social Security Administration, by the way, you guys need to realize that the brass, basically the top folks in Social Security, not the commissioner, because the commissioner usually serves at the leisure of, or the pleasure of, the president. But there are people who've been in Social Security for 30 years, that they're in upper levels of employment with the Social Security Administration, and they survive administration changes. They're just there for a long, long time. I do believe that the brass in Social Security, for whatever reason, believe that the Social Security Administration, which the Congress has mismanaged that fund for as long as I've been alive. I'm 60. So for 60 years, the Congress has mismanaged the so-called trust fund. And the way they're going to save Social Security is on the backs of the disabled. They're not going to do it for retirees, because retirees vote. But the disabled, a lot of times they don't have a fixed location. They're transient. They're having difficulties, with stability in their life. They're not going to vote, I mean, some of them are, but a lot of them aren't going to vote. And if they're not going to vote, that's who we can, that's who we can use. That's who we can scapegoat to show that the Social Security Administration is spending too much money. Is it spending money because of fraud? Well, they've done studies on that, and there's really, I think the last study was like 3%. Good luck finding that low of a fraud statistic in any government agency that handles billions and billions of dollars. Good luck with that. Try that with the VA. Try that with the Department of Defense. Good luck with that. So it's not fraud. What is it? Well, if the Congress has been pilfering money for the last 5 decades, there's really only one way to get that money back, and that's to tax the people that you stole the money from. And they're not going to do that because they'd be elected out of office. But if they can scapegoat the disabled, and we can't allow so many cases. Well, what if this person's really disabled? Shut up. We don't care if they're really disabled or not. We're not going to allow so many cases. And I've talked to judges about this. I've talked to our attorney partners about this. I've been doing this. I started my practice 22 years ago. I've been doing this for 35 years. In the last 10 years, I have seen 0 law changes that were favorable to the claimant. 0. When they change laws, and they do it a lot, by the way, it is always okay, we're going to make it harder on the claimant to prove disability. We're going to require something from them that it's going to be onerous. It's going to be hard for them. We're going to change the law. We're going to change the listing that where you used to have to only prove this, but now we're going to make it to where you have to prove this and this and this and this.
Yep.
And that has happened in the last 10 years. I can't name you one law that they've changed or ruling. It's usually an SSR, a Social Security ruling. I can't name you one in the past 10 years that has been favorable to the claimant or favorable to the process. We're going to make it easier, really? You're going to make it easier?
Yeah.
So, yeah, just basically an overview of what I'm saying. She's right. I wish she was wrong, but she's right. The appeals council, I don't believe they justify their existence. And of course, that sounds really hard for me to say. But being a former government employee, the government has to do studies every once in a while to justify certain positions. They justify the number of positions that they have, and they justify the position being, necessary to fulfill some kind of work obligation. If you are rubber stamping 85% of the decisions that come across your desk, I can look you in the eyeball, and it'll probably make you cry or make you cringe or make you angry, but I can look you in the eyeball and say, your position is not justified. If you're rubber stamping, you're not needed. If basically your job is to give a smile and a thumbs up to a judge's decision, almost 9 out of 10 times. Sorry, you can't justify your position. And that's why I'm so harsh on the appeals council.
If you have a question about your disability case, give us a call at 615-453-9151 Monday through Friday, or click the link in the description of this video.